go and some of the other pieces of the practice guide. And I thought the piece that was missing was that why we do these things. And so I thought the prayer one was a real good one. And then when I was going through it, I cried and I was like, you know what? All right, we're doing this. So, but also there's enough new people that haven't heard it, and there's enough people that I think enjoy the discussion that comes out of it. And as my old mentor used to say, when I was in the Unitarian church, most good preachers have 3 good sermons and the rest is just recycling in some various way or form. So, but, so I should probably get that ready then, huh? One day I'll upgrade to a not 30-pound MacBook from 20 years ago. That day is not today. By the way, for those that are new, because I don't think I've seen you guys before, we use this time to get it on Facebook, but also there's tea, there's a bathroom. If you guys want to get yourself something to drink, that's perfectly fine. All of the tea is good. The water is pretty hot, so be careful. But yeah, so if you need to go and do anything, you can go do it. All right. So good morning, everybody. As I've already explained, the topic of today's Dharma talk is prayer. One of the reasons I choose this topic is because I do a lot of it in my capacity as a chaplain. And it took me a long time to be able to understand it and do it authentically. And so that's the Dharma talk. Also, I believe that prayer is really important as a means to connect with others in a significant and healing way. And I like to be able to present a way for the Sangha to be able to engage in prayer that's authentic for you guys as well. And again, we've also had several talks recently for me about aspects of prayer or ritual or secular, non-secular things in our practice guide. And so this serves as a guide to that as well. Hope you found it useful. So when I began my chaplaincy internship at Children's Hospital, I had very little experience with prayer. In fact, most of my experience with prayer had a negative connotation. People telling me that they will pray for me or pray that I will change something they didn't like to something they did like. That usually meant there was some aspect of my being that they hoped their God would change in me. Oh no. That's the problem. I had everything highlighted and I hit a button and it all went away. Give me 1 second. It's back. And I unhighlighted everything. Let me go
I
back.
mentioned we'll be having a tech meeting later.
I don't think you can fix stupid. Okay. Blah, 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 something about prayer. Okay, back. I call this kind of prayer like a backhanded prayer. Or sometimes my experience of prayer was when I was in a deep emotional pain and the spirit of the prayer was something like, F it, I'll try anything to make this situation change. We can call this kind of prayer the Hail Mary prayer. Lastly, I experienced prayer, like many rituals I assumed were of Christian origin, to be offensive to my delicate secular sensibilities. A god or saint or bodhisattva that intercedes on someone's behalf was something I had scoffed at for most of my life. This kind of prayer, intercessory prayer, was a myth believed in by those that couldn't come to terms with reality. So my assessment at the time, back in the day, was that prayer was sometimes accusatory, sometimes desperate, something beneath me, and that prayer was ultimately futile. And yet, as a chaplain at Children's Hospital, I was in a position where I was not only expected to pray, but to do it well. As you can imagine, the first time I was asked to pray with a family went I mean, it went really well. Honestly, guys, it was great. Before this first attempt at prayer, I had been able to skillfully avoid praying with patients and families, but this situation kind of sprung up on me unexpected, and I froze. And then I started a directionless ramble of spiritual words and phrases I had heard while in seminary. Dear God, blah, 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 grace, blah, 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 mercy, healing, and so forth. That earned me a well-deserved side eye from the surgical patient's grandmother, and I felt really exposed. I was found out for a spiritual fraud that I was. Worse yet, prayer was important enough for this family that they had asked for it specifically from a chaplain, and I had let them down. But like any good fraud, I avoided what I was bad at and with increased vigor. I was a kind of prayer Houdini, a ninja, able to disappear at any time the possibility of praying arose. This worked for a little while, but my skillful chaplaincy supervisor began to notice the pattern and called me out at a morning meeting. Joe, you seem to enjoy praying. So I tried to pray. I really did, but it was bad, really bad. And at the end, she just said, "Thank you, Joe. That was fine." Again, that feeling that I had missed something important and failed. After the meeting concluded, she pulled me into the office, and I was like, double hell. You know the feeling when you get caught cheating on a test or stealing or something like that? No, surely the Sangha doesn't know that feeling. But either way, I felt ashamed and guilty. And she sat me down, let the moment stretch on uncomfortably, and she laughed. "Joe, you don't know how to pray, do you?" Well, no, I didn't. I had grown up in a tradition that didn't pray. Both my parents are more or less agnostic. I never really had any understanding of prayer outside the kinds that I told you about earlier. So she had some discussion. She understood where I was coming from. And so then she taught me to pray. She gave me a framework. This framework and a Buddhist perspective on it shall be the topic of the rest of the Dharma talk. First, the framework she gave me. Invoke a power larger than yourself. State the situation. Ask for a specific intervention. Name a specific outcome. Add a blessing. Finish it up with a dedication. Or, in other words, divinity, this is a situation. We need this so that we can have this outcome. Bless these people. Thank you, divinity. Amen. Now I had a formula. And as a good Buddhist, I'm very good at formulas and lists and those kinds of things. But more importantly, my supervisor had done something ingenious by giving me that formula. She was forcing me to listen to what patients were saying so that I had something to put into the formula. I found that using the formula helped me to become more deeply involved in the beliefs, stories, and experience that patients and families were having. You see, this is going to sound crazy, but in order to know what somebody believes, you have to ask them. In order to state what the situation is, you have to listen to what the situation is. Further, in order to understand the desired outcome, you have to ask the person what they hope for. Before I started a prayer, I found myself asking the patient or family what they wanted me to pray for. And often, more often than not, I was surprised by what I heard, because often I had misunderstood what they needed, or even worse, assumed I knew what they needed. I had thought that prayer was simple. I thought it was, "God, I have this ailment, take it away. Amen." And I was sincerely mistaken in that. What I found was that prayer is rarely about the disease or ailment itself, but the disruption that it causes in the fabric of a person's life. I was hearing people say things like, "I need peace," or "to feel safe," or for their families to not worry, etc. I wasn't hearing prayers for a cure or a miracle like I was expecting. I had thought that prayer was about asking God for material intervention and a change in the body. People begging for cures and miracles. What I heard were hopes for healing of the emotional and spiritual wounds created by the specific circumstances they were experiencing. Let me tell you, this aspect of prayer is incredibly intimate. When I asked people what they wanted me to pray for, this is when they shared themselves at their most vulnerable. Their fears, their hopes, and emotions. It was raw, honest, and a word that's difficult to find. This is the third iteration of it. I still can't find that word. They were placing in my hands their most sincere hopes for themselves and their families, and that is something precious. It's something sacred. To hear honestly from another human being what it is that they hope for and fear for the most is just, it's beautiful and rough. It provides a foundation for connection, a way for me to care about the people I was interacting with. And that's an important paradigm shift. I started to want things they needed with them instead of for them. I had thought that prayer was just about people begging to not be sick or to be wealthy or to change others. What I found was something else. Prayer was an opportunity to actually listen to someone else, to find out what they believed and hoped for. It was a way to be vulnerable and give voice to it. And that, my dear Sangha, is something special. When new staff at the hospital find out that I am Buddhist, a common question is, do Buddhists pray? Do Buddhists pray? Yeah, they do. In almost every Buddhist tradition, there's prayer or something very similar to it. Making offerings, certain kinds of chants can be seen as a form of prayer. Asking for the intercession of a bodhisattva is pretty close to. You find that more in Tibetan Buddhism, but we also have the four immeasurables, the Heart Sutra, the Enmei Jigul Kannon Go. We have when we almost pray for people at the very beginning of the service after we chant or after we meditate. And so going further from that, I have this other little paragraph that I don't like, so I'm gonna skip over it. So why are these things Buddhist? Sympathetic concern for the suffering or misfortune of others. Do you know what that is? A pretty good description of compassion. Through the practice of praying, you could be cultivating and intentionally practicing compassion for others. Being an attentive listener, being present for a person enough to really connect with who they are, where they are at, and what they want, and then to want those things with them, that sounds like practicing mindfulness. Understanding that their hopes and fears are as much a part of your well-being as theirs, that sounds like appreciating the interdependence of all beings and karma. Practicing compassion and mindfulness, understanding interdependence and karma, that sounds very Buddhist to me. Prayer understood in this way sounds very Buddhist as well. Prayer can be a particularly potent way of practicing Buddhist values. And I'm going to take it one step further. Our order often talks about rigorous self-honesty. Many of you may not walk in circles where regular prayer is a thing. I don't know which happens. I get it. That's fine. So pray for yourself. What do you want? What do you need? Why? What outcomes are you hopeful for? Why do you want them? This is an opportunity for self-reflection that requires you to be honest with yourself and practice some self-care. Or pray for somebody else. Imagine what it's like to be them and then want something with them. Peace, well-being, whatever you wish for them out of a spirit of beneficent intent. Well, you can also go further and ask yourself the why questions too. You may be surprised as to why you want certain things for certain people. Why do you want to pray for the things that you do? Don't get hung up on the God or divine language. Pick something that is great for yourself and offer your prayer to that. Or don't. What's important is that you try to figure prayer out for yourself. It has become a daily practice for me and has changed me for the better. So I hope I offered you a different perspective on prayer that is grounded in Buddhist values and practice. I offer it as a tool to be used to practice compassion, to be mindful of yourself and others, to understand interdependence, and to directly engage the hopes and fears, the joys and sufferings of the world and those around you. I also offer this way to reimagine your relationship with our practice guide. I hope you find that useful. Yeah. It's also places where prayer 3.0 might use prayer 4.0, but next year.
To me, the word prayer has more power to it than for those of us on Facebook. We've had the experience. Someone is going through a tragedy, someone's dying. Or in the old days before Facebook, when you would actually send a card or a letter to someone. Commonly, a believer would say, you know, my prayers are with you, I'm grateful. And as a non-theist, I, for a while, had difficulty with that. You know, you'd say, my thoughts are with you. But for me, saying my thoughts are with you does not have the same power as saying my prayers are with you. So I choose to define the prayer, not in the way that I'm reaching out to a higher power. But just that it's something more impactful. My thoughts. I find it a useful word in that way. I like having that available to use.
Something more, it changes the way that you engage from the mundane, like to something different. Like you said, something elevated, something a little bit more special. And I like thinking of prayer in that context as well. Like, it's not just I'm thinking of you, I'm thinking of you in such a way that I hope for you, I hope with you that whatever is going on gets better or changes. It's not just like, well, I thought about you. You know, it's something different.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's a way of engaging the sacred. It's about changing a mundane, I'll use mundane kind of frequently as just like things as they are. But we can have the conversation that things that they are not have things that they are and they're special and that everything is sacred. I get it. But for most of us, there's just the regular way things are, but then there's also this extra aspect of it sometimes that we get to touch, that we get to grab at, that we get to experience. And I think prayer, understood in that way, allows us to not only change our experience of a situation, but to also kind of connect with somebody else on that level.
So this tells you how old I am, but back when I was very young, I went to KTC. So I guess I have to give a little context. So the Karmapa is kind of like the Dalai Lama. So and I ended up going to Holland because I have relatives there. My dad's originally from there. But I had promised that there's the very first light, which is they do that every year for, I don't know, maybe you can speak to that too, but like, so this is kind of like their first light where at the very beginning of the year, they, at sunrise, it's a very formal prayer where you do a lot of wishing goodness for not just the world peace, but then also like your teachers, and the main teacher is the Karmapa. And so, you know, Y2K, like the party night or the, you know, in Holland, fires on the streets, everybody's like going crazy, but I'm like, okay, I promised that I was gonna do this formal prayer at sunrise. So I made sure, like, I kept my word. And then a couple of days later, I see on the Dutch, and I don't understand a lot of Dutch, I'm like, that's the Karmapa. And I have to ask my brothers, what's going on? And that's when he actually escaped, like during that time. And then it really dawned on me that on sunrise throughout the whole world, people were saying those prayers as the sun rose. And so that really changed my relationship to like formal prayer too, because it was like, okay, I promised to do this thing, yeah, it's world peace. But it's like this guy was escaping while all these people were praying, for his well-being. And I thought that was like something that transformed me in my relationship to prayer. Because it's not like, oh, I'm a little girl wishing for a pony for my birthday. It's like this. I think it can really have, a beautiful community building experience too. So I don't know if somebody else wants to like interject on some of that, but I was just like, wow, all these people prayed throughout all this time, the same prayer. And so I thought it was very powerful.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a really cool experience too. To just, there's something that happens when all of us are chanting like the Eme Juhu Kanagyo. Like, yes, it is just a small song, it is just this sample, but all of us are focused on one syllable at a time, one purpose, and we're all doing it together. That's really cool. I do enjoy that.
I think it's like sometimes too hard, like, oh geez, I have to pray today, or like for all these different people necessarily when I'm not, but then it does like tune you in and get you out of your own mind, I guess.
It's been a long time, but a long time ago, I read an article about a scientific study on prayer. And they said that it doesn't matter the religion. They had like Jewish people, Christians, different religions praying for specific people, for a specific person in a hospital. And those people had better outcomes, even if the people praying for them didn't know who they were. And that sort of changed my mind on prayer. And I know a talk, and I can't remember which one of you, I think it was you gave, on the Bodhisattva vow where we broke it down line by line. I remember when I first started coming thinking what a beautiful sentiment is in that vow. But then as we come week after week, you just kind of start saying it and not really thinking about the words. So that makes me try to really think about the words as I'm saying it. And another thing that I just started doing recently, NPR stories often touch me. And, I can pray for immigrants, but if I hear a specific story on NPR that touched me, I can pray for that person at that moment when I'm feeling, the compassion and the hope for them. And I think that's more powerful than just, I hope, immigrants are safe or whatever.
No, I think that's an important aspect of whatever you want to call prayer, or when you're meditating or anything, is being able to bring on that emotion, to experience it, and then to transform it into something meaningful or more meaningful. That's, if you've ever done it, it can literally change you. Or even if you've ever been in like a really desperate situation where your heart has just been broken, or being able to give voice to it, to name the emotion, and then to experience it and to transform it. That's prayer too. At least that could be one definition of prayer that I find pretty useful.
Yeah, I think we need to you all know my theory on words by now, that we need to stop getting caught up in the way other people see words and use them the way they're appropriate for us. And if prayer is a big one for that, religion is another one. My view of religion is not necessarily the same as other people's, but I still use this. This is a religious community to me. Prayer is very much the same. Just because most people in the West see it as intercessory prayer to a Judeo-Christian God doesn't mean that's what it has to be for me. But it also doesn't mean that I have to reject prayer as being an effective spiritual practice just because their definition doesn't agree with mine.
Joe? I was very touched with your supervisor's formula for prayer and struck with the intimacy of the moment. Thank you for sharing that.
I love this talk, Joe. Thank you for it. I appreciate your comment in the beginning of when you were a UU and they said there's really only 3 sermons. Everything else is a permutation of that. I know that didn't have anything to do with the prayer sermon, but I do appreciate that comment. It evokes one of my favorite definitions of prayer, and a couple people have alluded to what is your definition of prayer. This was based on a talk I heard or an interview by Joseph Goldstein, and he was referring to Mother Teresa. And he said they asked her once, does she pray? And she said, yes. And they said, what do you say when you pray? Essentially focusing on the words. And she says, I don't say anything. I just listen. And she said, well, you pray to God. And she goes, yeah. Well, what does God say then? You're listening. And she said, he doesn't say anything. He just listens. And if you don't understand that, there's nothing I can say that will explain it to you. And I love that. It's different than my definition of prayer several years ago, and several years from now, maybe even next month, my definition may change. But that's the one. That's my go-to for today, and I love that. And when people used to ask me about prayer, and I think I've heard this in a different flavor already this morning, I say, look, it doesn't really matter. Like, I know that walking is good for me. It doesn't matter. Some days I walk on the treadmill, some days I walk on a rocky path, some days I walk barefoot, some days I walk in the street. Walking is healthy for me. Prayer, I'm not going to get hung up on who I'm praying to, how I'm praying. These days it's listening, but the act of praying based on a definition that resonates with my deepest truths is healthy for me. And I won't let other people define what prayer should be for me. I just continue doing it because it's really healthy for me. And those around me, they seem to accrue some benefit from it too. But so I love the talk, and thank you everybody for your comments. Lovely discussion this morning.
I think Jason had his hand up before the.
Yeah, Jerry, if you were talking, could you repeat what you were saying? Because we lost connection for a moment.
I thought that my screen froze up for that moment. Yes. I was just thanking Joe for sharing with us what his supervisor gave as a formula for prayer. It really identified the intimacy situation in the moment of praying. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jerry. Dorian, did you have a comment?
Yeah, a couple things. Thanks for asking. By the way, I love this topic, and I'm so glad, Joe, you brought it into the space. I'm excited about bringing prayer into Buddhism and the exchange between Buddhism and sometimes Christianity, and how does that work? How can we make it work? What's secular about it? I'm just grateful you brought this in. I remember when I was in 12-step recovery, this was in Boulder, Colorado, and there were several Tibetan Buddhists there who were atheists, and some of them told me about how this 12-step group I was a part of, how it was deeply Buddhist and emerged out of the Buddhist practice locally, and that even though many of them were atheist and agnostic, there were certain things going on in the Buddhist community that were very challenging at that time that I won't go into, but how they had to learn to get down on their knees basically and pray to a God they didn't believe in just to make their recovery work. It's like, okay, I don't believe in you, but I'm going to do this and I'm going to cry out for help. And just how effective that was for some of the people in that group. So anyway, I'm recalling that group, praying to a God we don't believe in, faking it, and finding that actually powerful. My second point, though, was more of a question. I'm wondering, Joe, from your experience as a chaplain, do you have any thoughts or ideas about? Would you have any insights around how you help people, especially people who are sick or ill, who might even be desperate? How you help them move from a place of, well, maybe just what you're already doing is exactly the answer, but how do you help people move from begging and pleading to surrender and acceptance in prayer, so that people are not set up for false hope and disappointment and a loss of faith? Just wondering, what is that? How do you do that with people that you work with, especially in a chaplain, especially in hospital chaplaincy, where you don't often get to see those people all the time again? I'm wondering I don't know, if you have any thoughts or insights about
That is a complicated question and assumes that I am a good chaplain, which I am not. No. So a lot of the times, the prayers are the first kind that you said, because we're in crisis, and that's the appropriate thing for that situation. As we move forward in a situation, if there is time given, you will often find that when people are given space to talk about what's going on, when they're given space to experience what's going on, and they have enough to, dear God, just help them be comfortable, right? But there is a time and place for both kinds of prayers, and it depends on where the person is at in that moment. If you try and move someone to surrender and acceptance when they are not in a place, then you will lose your place as chaplain, because they will no longer trust you. They will think that you have given up hope. But that's not my job. Isn't usually to move them from one spot to the other. My spot is to accompany them in their journey and to be the thing that just listens and offers slight perspective changes at times and helps them get to that place of acceptance. Sometimes I can do that. Sometimes I can be helpful. Sometimes all I can do is just be there for the journey and make it. My job is to make things suck less, but I cannot make them not suck. And very often, I find that in my capacity as a chaplain, if I try to make them better, I will make them worse. So does that make sense? I don't know if that completely answers your question.
Well, I think that makes a ton of sense. I appreciate, no, it's realistic. It's, you're meeting them right where they're at. I can't imagine how hard that, at least for me, I know that would be very difficult to keep joining and being where they're at, right where they're at. I think it makes a ton of sense. I'll just say though, kudos to you for work that I think that for me would be pretty hard to do in those situations so often, almost every day. So I can imagine the work being pretty challenging, but it sounds like you're really joining with them. I think that's.
Well, it's just like any other job. They train you for it and then you do it. So I just happen to enjoy it. That didn't
Great, great.
quite, but you know what I mean? Like, what did, it
Thank
wasn't,
you, Jeff.
it was a later supervisor that said that being a chaplain is a lot like being a human. You have to have the ability to let your heart break over and over and over again, and just keep going. So it's just like being human, right? Like you have good times and bad times. It is what it is. Anyway,
This is Curtis coming to you live from the back of the room. Well, first off, being retired military, even though I had left the Christian church, there's chaplains obviously in the military. They were always meaningful to me because they could speak to whoever, no matter what their philosophy was. But they also slept in the foxholes, rode on the ships, were not sitting in some nice little church. They lived the life of the soldiers, And so I always had a lot of respect for them. Touching real quickly on the scientific thing that was brought up earlier, I too read an article and they had done tests or MRI aspects with people who prayed to a deity, as in God, basically Christians, Judaism, or Islam, and atheists that meditated or Buddhists that meditated. And they found from the brain working as an organ, the same electrochemical aspects still work the same way. So whether you were praying to God or simply meditating, the physical effect for the human being was the same. So if I'm praying about the new job and I'm a Christian and I decide to take the new job, I'll say, well, I prayed, God told me to take the new job and it came from God. But if I'm Buddhist and I meditated on the new job and I decided to take the new job, I'd say, well, I meditated on it, came up with it for myself. So where I'm going with this, we sometimes take a little while to get to my point. Back to my wife being ill that I've brought up many times. The chaplain that was with the hospice was wonderful. His basis was as a Baptist. But my wife's cognitive cognition and memory and her basic mental operations were just falling apart. She was raised Presbyterian, knew that God loved her, knew that Jesus loved her, and it was almost like a kindergarten Sunday school understanding is what it had reduced down to. Yet as a chaplain, he was able to speak to her at that level and not go off on this deep philosophical thing. At the same time, he knew my philosophies in Buddhism and stuff. And although he was a Baptist, he talked to me as if he had studied the Dharma and stuff. He was really amazing. And then at the celebration of life, of course, he read 3 different prayers. And the 2 prayers were Christian prayers for her family, basically really touching on her family as Presbyterians, and one specifically for her. And then followed that right up with this beautiful Buddhist prayer for my wife passing on to the next wherever we go and stuff. And I just thought that was fantastic of the chaplain to be able to go into different households with different faiths or mixed faiths, and using meditation or prayer kind of under the same umbrella to make it work for the family as well as the patient. Was I clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like the aspect of thinking of meditation and prayer working the same way in the brain. I think that's not the only thing I got from what you were saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But just bringing it back, I think that's an important touchstone that is very interesting.
Daphne. From my interpretation of my experience, prayer seems to be a way for one to set intention, and then the aspect of the divine or personality or whatnot sets the framework for what that intent is. So let's say I'm having conflict with someone, we're not getting along, we're arguing all the time, and I want peaceful resolution. So I pray for that. But do I pray to the goddess of harmony? If I do that, then maybe I'll change myself to fit the situation. Or do I pray to goddess of strife? In which case, my inner nature will meet their inner nature. Right, like.
No, so what you're talking about is defining the context that you are going to enter into. And I think that's an important believing in. So.
It's a for example.
Yeah, no, like is the context that you're hoping to resolve, I guess, so it sounds to me like you're setting the context. So when deciding who you're going to pray to, you're defining how you want that thing to resolve. And so asking yourself why you would want to differentiate between the two and which is more important as the defining context for you, I think will help you make a more authentic and intentional prayer once you start it. So, and if not, and if you can't decide which is more important, just do both. You know what I mean? I don't see why that.
I mean, aspects of it, I would assume that like aspects of the divine are just stepping stones to finding the higher self.
I would disagree.
That seems like it fits into your framework nicely, right? You know, if my intended outcome is different, then I need to think about the approach, right? If my intention is I need to be stronger so that I can resolve this situation or avoid getting dragged into it, that's one possible approach. And if the intention is I need to get over my ego and figure out how to listen to this person, that's a different intention.
Correct.
But they both fit nicely into the framework. It's just part of that sort of setting it up.
I think that's an interesting use of archetypes, and I think I might use that going forward. I know, for example, I think Jane Goodall is a saint on earth, and I would pray to that woman.
No, and not dissimilar from what you're saying, like in Catholicism, you have all these different saints that are patron saints of this, that. In Tibetan Buddhism, you have all the different bodhisattvas, the taras, the kind of like we were talking about earlier. Like they are specific entities that you put that provide a specific kind of skill set that you can appeal to in order to resolve whatever it is you. And so I think in trying to get into your own head about why or what you want, thinking about who or what you're going to pray to, if that's a way of differentiating it for you, is a good way of being like, okay, so what is the actual problem that I'm having? Is it that I'm not listening? Is it that I am like with conflict? Is it I lack the ability to listen? Is it that I desire harmony more than I desire being right? Is it me wanting to be right that I'm appealing to? All of those questions are important ones to ask ourselves that will reveal more about you than they will about your conflict, but they're important to ask. Like those are things you take to the cushion, like, man, I want a new job. Okay, well, why do you want a new job? Is it because this one's dissatisfactory? Is it because you don't make enough money? Why is the money an issue? Why are you unhappy? Why? And just follow it all the way down the rabbit hole until you get to, well, you know what I mean? And then you pray about that, you know?
I think one of both the advantages and difficulties of Western Buddhism is that we have to think about these things because so many people come to Buddhism in the West because they have been harmed, many times badly harmed, by traditional religion in the West. And they come from a sense of, this is a philosophy, not a religion. I'm not going to get into all these things that hurt me previously. And often people will hear language like this and it brings up trauma.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things we have to be careful with in Western Buddhism. One of the advantages we have is the ability to say, this is one way of talking about it. If you don't want to talk about this on your journey on the Dharma path, then don't. And we as practitioners have to be open to, hey, no, when you all chant, I'm not going to do it. Great. That sense of plurality is at the very heart of pragmatism. And it's the reason that my teacher chose the name Pragmatic Buddhism for this movement, is because we cannot say, oh no, we're secular Buddhist. We don't pray. But we also can't say, oh no, we have no place for secular Buddhists. Unless you make 3 prostrations before you begin your meditation, you're not doing it correctly. One of my students went to a new Zen center when he moved to a new town, and he turned counterclockwise when he got off the cushion. And the woman behind him literally slapped him on the shoulder and said, no, don't turn that way. Turn around the other way. And he never went back. We can't do that. We have to be open to the plurality of expression. Unfortunately, what many secular Buddhists forget is that being open to the plurality of expression also includes being open to those who have a very spiritual, what we might describe as religious or mystical approach to the Buddhist path. We have to be open to that as well. And that's why I think discussions like this are very important, to say, yeah, this is one way to think about things, and to say, okay, does prayer in any definition fit into your practice? If so, embrace it, whether that's the traditional definition of prayer or not. Embrace what is important to you. And if it doesn't fit at all, that's fine too. As long as you're walking the path of compassion and loving kindness then you're walking the darker path. So I do think these discussions are very important, as long as we remain open and accepting.
We're going a bit long.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wrap it up here in a minute.
Way long,
Does
well.
anyone have something to say that hasn't said something?
Just quickly, one aspect of prayer that I found myself thinking about this morning is surrender. And just there is some overlap with some things that have been said, and paradoxically, it's like we're asking for something to be changed usually, or maybe the strength to handle something that's troubling us. But what I find prayer accomplishes for me is like it's surrendering and kind of seeing the lack of control, the impermanence, the suffering that's going on, and just accepting that that's a thing, surrendering like myself to the situation that is happening. I read a very good book recently by Adyashanti, Falling into Grace. I found myself thinking about that book. So surrender is one aspect of prayer where I feel like there can be catharsis.
Absolutely agreed. Anybody else? So I guess in summation, prayer is another powerful tool that you can have in your toolbox. Like Glenn said, it's a complicated thing, and if it works for you, then do it. If it doesn't, then don't. Kind of like with the chanting and the Meiju Kanyo, like anything in the practice guide. But the important thing in any of these discussions is that you find the things that are meaningful for you and then you do them. So I encourage you all, if prayer is your thing, go out there and engage it in a more authentic way. If it's something else, find it and do it, because that's pragmatic. You're welcome, but thank you all for coming.
We talk about for officials.
Oh yeah, the finishing prayers.
Since we're talking about prayer, let's do it.
Amen. Bodhisattva vow.
Page 3.
On page 3, for the new ones at the bottom. Creations are numberless. I will strive to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I will strive to transform them. Reality is boundless. I will strive to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I will strive to embody it. May your thoughts, words, and actions be corrective and encompassing of the pragmatic Buddhist path. May you approach this week with deference and dignity, and may you spread your personal peace to all those you encounter. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Swaha. I did. Thanks, everybody.
If anybody's interested, especially in Thich Nhat Hanh, yesterday on YouTube, his new movie premiered. It's 27 minutes long. It gives a nice historical overview of his life experiences and how he established his different Plum Village and the other ones in the other countries and stuff. But all you have to do is go to YouTube. It's called Cloud Never Dies. And it's 27 minutes long, but
Well played.
it's fabulous.
They have stream everything today.
No, but I got an email, and that's a good reminder, because yes, I definitely want.
We will start the technology discussion meeting in about 5 minutes. Give everybody a chance to settle down over here. So online, welcome to hang out.
He has a book about the 20 minutes. I can't find it yet.
Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet.
Yeah.
I just read that
Did
a few
you?
weeks ago.
I.
It's actually not really by him, it's more by the two people.
Oh.
Hey, Brian, you might want to stop the Facebook Live feed.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Good call, Geneva, thank you.
Did you?
Yeah.
Where? Yeah, no, I just kind of got out of my library practice. I'll have to go for a certain long while.
Any thoughts?
Yeah.
This is our first for a day.
I remember,
No, wait.
the first time I was there, I was asking for.
But it's not so long that you
Look
start.
on crocheting, I started
Yeah.
crocheting. That,
You should have been a little
I
longer,
just,
but,
it explained things the way I could work on,
you know.
and I couldn't find it on the.
Sorry, I'm gonna still use that.
It said it was there.
And if you've read a lot of his books, it's a lot of stuff.